Final hour OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Best bets later on the hour on the Jays-Orioles tonight. Game 3 of their series, currently tied 1-1. So you got a bit of a tiebreak scenario down at the Dome tonight, Struddy. Kevin Gausman on the mound, who's also an Orioles alumni, going up against his former team tonight. So we'll tee that up. And Vladdy going for 20 straight games with a hit. He has been a rock star for the last 2 months. That continued last night. No reason to believe it won't continue tonight. So we'll get to that a little bit later this hour. And our buddy Nabil Karim coming up. Nabil's over there for CBC. You know him obviously from TNT, formerly of TSN. Nabil's in Paris, and he was there covering the game. USA getting past Serbia today. And it was, man, that's so close to just a wild story. You know, and you said it, I think, accurately last hour, Strud. The better final, the better gold medal match is USA versus France, and that's what we have now. But the idea of the Americans not winning gold and silver, the reaction in the States if they had a loss to Serbia today would have been crazy, and I think a lot of fun to actually witness.
No, and there's so many stars on those teams. It's like every team has so many stars, and that is the American team. And you do want to have, like, I honestly think, like, the Winter Olympics, you know, for many people, the gold medal final is one of the premier events in it. So I think that the basketball, from a team perspective, not to be disrespectful to other team events, but it's a marquee event. So you want to have the home team and then the stars all over the Americans. So I think it's a really good setup. But I would have liked to see the fallout. I have to admit, I kind of like that chaos at times, especially when it doesn't affect us. Like, we're Canadian. You know, if LeBron James doesn't win a gold medal, it doesn't change my day at all. But if you're Canadian and Sidney Crosby doesn't win it in 2002, we got a different situation going on here in the hockey world.
Big time. And I do think a part of the viewing process for Canadians, and I think probably every nation around the world, is you root for your country. You focus 95% of your time and energy into your own country. And then the other 5% is rooting against the U.S. Right? He's kind of rooting for the Americans not to win.
Or the favorites.
They're so dominant. You know, like they're so dominant. They have the most athletes all the time. They show up at the summer games. They just cruise through the medal count. Like, they just lap the field generally. And, you know, it's just, that's the reality. Is they've got so many people, so many great athletes, so much money and so much support for sports and for their athletes in the U.S. And the payoff is, you know, every 2 years, whether it's at the Winter Games or the Summer Games, the Americans show up and they usually put on a clinic. You know, so you try to find your spots within there. And if your team's not going to win, a lot of times you're like, well, maybe the Americans won't either. But usually you get disappointed because they do. Right? They do find a way to win all the time.
Yeah,
but,
a lot of talent.
Yeah.
A lot of talent, and then the way that they build up the athletes and just the whole development model, everything, right? Then just the number of people and money and some determined athletes. That seems to be the recipe that works.
Pretty lethal combination right there.
It is. Yeah.
And, you know, it's coming for hockey, Strud. Like, you know, it's been a long time coming, because 30 years ago, when the Americans had their kind of golden generation and they won the 96 World Cup, and that's when they had Medano and Chelios and Kachuk and Hull and Roenick and, you know, across the board, Mike Richter and Net and Brian Leach in his prime. Like, they were loaded. And then, you know, it was kind of like, we may be in one here as Canadians. Like, these guys are actually really good and they're going to compete. And it just has never materialized at the Olympic Games for the Americans. You know, they won silver in 2002, obviously, silver in 2010, losing to Canada. But beyond that, they've really never been a team to be reckoned with. They usually end up kind of just crapping out. They're not even a part of the program. The pressure will be on the Americans to prove that they can stick with Canada come 2026. But this roster, it is loaded. Like, I am curious to see what the betting odds are going to be come puck drop 2026. I think right now Canada is still a favorite. I think they should be a favorite. I would anticipate they still will be favored to win gold medal come 2026. But if it's not them, it's the Americans, and it very well could be a pick 'em by then, Strud. Like, it could be Canada, U.S. neck and neck by 2026.
The one area that I see that would be a real give me pause is the net. I think that the Americans have a lot of goaltenders, and the Canadians, there's time, but not a lot of time for someone to grab that and say, this is the guy. And you look back in the past, there always seemed to be the guy, right? Someone that could step up, but I'm not sure who it is just yet.
Yeah, I know. They're going to have to figure that out pretty quickly, right? You got about a year and a half to do that, and
Sure.
You're right. The Americans they're loaded in net, they're loaded on defense. And as for the basketball team, I mean, the hope was it would be Canada, U.S., and the gold medal. It was going to set up that way based on the bracket. But we know what happened, Canada losing to France. I guess you could take some solace in the fact that France also beat Germany. Like, France is legit. They're very defensively stout. They've got, they're hitting a bunch of outside shots. Wemby's showing up, and he was pretty good again today. But France made it through to the gold medal match earlier today. And then they were waiting for the Americans, and I think most people thought it was a formality. They were just going to beat up on Serbia, and that was not the case at all. Serbia had a double-digit lead at the half, and they were leading going into the fourth quarter, and then the U.S. just blew their doors off in the fourth quarter, and U.S. ends up beating Serbia 95-91. What a game it was, and a guy that was there, a guy that's been covering the NBA for a long time now with TNT, used to cover it with TSN. One half of the world-famous Nabauskas. We'll never forget it. We always reference Nabauskas on the show, and we love it. And here's our main man, Nabil Karim, who's over there in Paris and covered the game earlier today. What's happening, Nabil?
What's going on, man? This is late for me. It's 12:06 out here.
Yes.
I'm just standing outside a bar right now, hanging with my guy Dan Shulman, my guy T.O. So I'd step out and I'd give you a couple minutes. Hey, I know you're a big star now, man. Ever since I left Toronto, all I see in my feed is Bryan Hayes this, Bryan Hayes that. He's on Jay show, throwing out hot takes. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. To get the call to be on OverDrive, I got to do it even if it's past midnight.
I love it, man. I love it. I appreciate you pumping my tires, too. I appreciate you doing that. Following your footsteps, man. You're a big shot on American TV. I'm just, trying to do my thing here. But I appreciate you doing that. I know it must be incredible vibes out there in Paris. And, I mean, we were talking about this earlier that I don't think you could write the story any better than this. USA versus France, in Paris for the gold medal. Is this the perfect? I mean, taking Canada out of it, obviously, we'd love to see the Canadians in it. But U.S., France, gold medal, does it get any better than that?
I think today's game felt like the gold medal. Like, honestly, being there and the way it worked out. But even if you had said prior to, like, what is your best matchup with the United States besides Canada for us Canadians, it would have been Serbia. So the way it worked out, they see each other in the semifinals, and I know you said earlier, maybe people would have thought the Americans would have run over the Serbians, but I didn't think so. Like, I thought it was going to be a competitive game. And what you saw from their previous game that they played in group stage and what they played in that exhibition was that Serbians didn't show everything they had. And the one thing they were going to do was they were going to play the hell out of Nikola Jokic in this game, and they did, right? I think he only rested for a minute 18 in the first half and 60 seconds in the second half. And if he didn't get in foul trouble, I don't know if that game's going to the Americans. Maybe, but maybe not, because he got his fourth foul, I believe, with like 7:18 left in that game. And that changed everything because he couldn't be as aggressive. And as you guys know, like, FIBA basketball is not like the NBA, right? These guys are hammering each other. And a big part of Nikola Jokic's game here is being physical. He couldn't do that anymore, and that kind of changed the game.
Yeah. Go ahead, Strud.
On the American side, was there, like, who was the guy that kind of rallied the troops when they were down by, more than a pretty decent high number, double digits?
Yeah, I mean, Steph Curry got the party going, right? And, like, with Steph Curry, it's interesting because he hasn't shot the ball well here. Coming into the game, like, from three, he was shooting, I think it was 25 or 26%. And he kind of said, I talked to him after the game, and prior to the game, he had said he felt like a flurry was coming because he got the shots that he always takes, just they weren't falling for him. But when he got, I think it was 15 or 17 points in that first quarter, I think that was a huge boost for the Americans, even though Serbia really gave them a push. But then you got to go back to LeBron James. I mean, getting a triple-double in that game, LeBron was phenomenal. And then when they needed somebody else to step up the most in that fourth quarter, Kevin Durant quietly does it. He had some huge buckets, and a big turn in the game was when Jokic got his fourth foul. That was on that KD 3. They get a free throw, and then Devin Booker also hits a three-pointer after that. So that was a huge swing right there. But Kevin Durant also quietly he didn't have a great game, but in that fourth quarter, man, he made some huge buckets.
So, you said, Nabil, that you think this kind of felt like the gold medal match or gold medal game, and the Americans get past the Serbians. Yet, France has been they've been a tough nut to crack, man. I mean, the Canadians know that, and now the Germans know it today. There's going to be a lot of French fans, obviously, in the crowd. There's going to be pressure on these guys. Wemby's, stats don't necessarily pop out, but now that you're over there in Paris and you've covered Wemby in the NBA, I think we all know what the expectation is in terms of what he's going to develop into and, probably be the best player in the NBA within the next 2 or 3 years. What's his profile like in Paris, throughout France? Like, how big of a star is he already in his own, in his own country?
He's massive. Like, if you go around and you look at signage anywhere in Paris, and the other part of the tournament was in Lille, which is about 2 hours away where we were, all the signage everywhere is Wemby. If you go into the Nike store, you go in any store here to buy a jersey, there are Wembanyama jerseys everywhere. You're not seeing a Rudy Gobert jersey. You're not seeing an Adam Fournier jersey. It is Wemby everywhere. And the coolest thing is when he comes out, he's usually the first player out in warm-ups and stuff. And there's a massive standing ovation for him. The crowd loves him. Even when he struggles here, they're boosting him up. They're chanting MVP at one point for him today. Like you mentioned, he hasn't played the way we're kind of accustomed to in San Antonio. I kind of get a hit on it today because I remember when I was in the Spurs game this year, Craig Popovich was telling us, like, they wanted him to be creative. They wanted to unlock all his potential. They were giving him free reign to do thing's right? And again, the NBA game's so different, a lot more one-on-one, a lot more creativity. Whereas here, it's kind of odd to me because I was talking to Dan Schulman about this after. Like, they don't use him the same way and not even close to the same way. They don't even run pick and rolls for him. Like, Wemby is just a guy there right now who's kind of tall and he's a defensive presence, but offensively, the coach was, Vincent Collet, he was upset that Wemby was holding on to the ball too long because in his mind, France is at their best when they're pushing the basketball and they're also moving the basketball. You get a lot of ball movement, but he thought Wemby was kind of slowing down the offense and kind of making it stagnant. He actually called him out publicly here, which is kind of a big move, right, for a guy of that stature who's coming up. But, man, this guy is going to be a global superstar, in the next 2, 3, 4 years. When the games come up in L.A. in 2028, I can't even imagine how big this guy's going to be, maybe even on like a Ronaldo Messi type level.
Oof. When you look at the France and their path to victory, is it just stout or tight defense and make it really hard for the Americans and kind of maybe keep the pace a little slower than the Americans want to run with the ball?
They're going to have to use their size because that's what gave the Americans a lot of trouble today, right? Like, Serbia was all over the boards. They were all over the offensive glass. The Americans are big. I got Joel Embiid. By the way, when you asked me earlier who really stepped up, Joel Embiid.
Yep. Oh, I think we might have lost Nabil.
People, right?
You still hear us? Nabil, you got us?
Yeah, I got you. You
okay, yeah, man. Sorry, you just cut out there. But yeah, you're saying Joel Embiid was awesome today.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just saying he had a great game for the Americans, so he's a guy who really stepped up. But just going back to Jason's question about France and what they got to do, I think they got to use their size, right? Because that's what gave the Americans a lot of problems today was the size of Serbia. Now, the difference is the Serbians are that physical YMCA strength, dad strength, whereas like when you look at France, Victor's real thin. You look at Rudy Gobert's not playing right now.
Right.
And there's some story out here right now that Rudy has hurt his finger. He had some kind of procedure on his finger. His coach has denied that. He's got the finger wrap, so we don't know. It's different than the NBA here. You get less access to players and stuff like that. So it's a little hard to find out what's really happening. But Rudy Gobert is not playing, and he's barely playing. But against the Americans, he might play a lot more because, again, of his resume in the NBA, tendencies with some of these players, and they're going to have to match up against a guy like Joel Embiid. So I think they really need to continue to do that. Now, they have some players who we saw against Canada who really hurt the Canadians. They still got to be really physical with the Americans. I think that part of their game is going to resonate. But if the Americans get out to like a 16-5, 20-5 early lead, it could be a pretty ugly game, I think.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. Yet it's the beauty of the games. I mean, anything could happen at this point, and it's U.S. versus France for the gold medal. Nabil, you're a legend, pal. We appreciate you doing this. I know it's a busy time over there. Get back to Shulman. Let Shulman know the Jays are still kind of struggling, but Vladdy's red hot. I'm sure he wants to know that. And we'll do it again down the road. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, and he always asks about you.
Yes.
No, he asks about you all the time.
As he should.
When he said that.
As he should. Tell him Ben's crushing it. Ben is
all right,
crushing it.
I'm going to go back into 3 Dutch.
Yes.
Hey, by the way, you say that. That's absolutely the case because we watch Ben from out here because with the time difference, we'll tune into some of Ben's games and he's a stud, man. He's an absolute stud. I mean, he's just 23 years old. It's crazy how good he is. Crazy how good he is. Yeah. So say hi to the whole crew over there. Thanks for doing this, buddy. We'll do it again soon. All right, take care, guys. There he is, Nabil Karim of CBC, also TNT, formerly TSN, one of the best guys ever, man. Nabil is such a good guy, such a legend. And he's doing an incredible work down there in the U.S. and obviously covering the games here for CBC. And he's over there. Dan Shulman been calling the games on CBC, really cool. And, sounds like a pretty good scene in Paris right now, Strud. It does. And I guess what is it like for a reporter there? Like, we know as a fan, you're just blowing in the wind from event to event. But like, it's got to be really long days getting there, getting information, watching the game, filing stories or whatever it is. And then they get a little relaxed. Like, it sounds like he's going in for a couple, pretzel bites, I guess. But like, what is it like? Do you know anyone I don't really know anyone who's ever done it. It's a very different process based on who I've spoken to that's been over there because you're dealing with so many more hurdles, right? Like whenever you get to the IOC, whenever you deal with FIFA, like I know the World Cup, FIFA, it was a disaster, I think, trying to cover the Canadian team. Now, some of it is the country that also runs it too, right? So you have the individual athlete, then you have the individual athlete's team, then you have their country, then you have the federation, then you have the IOC. Like there's just so many different layers. And, there's also broadcasting partners that get, like, clearly they have the right to so much more access than the average media pool does. Like NBC gets everything because they pay a fortune. Like the whole Olympic Games effectively runs around NBC. Everything is NBC. They would get first choice on everything. They get first choice on timing, on where their set is, who they can talk to, all that kind of stuff. Because the Olympic Games is still a business in the end, and I think it's one thing if you're covering it for a rights holder. It's another thing to cover it for a non-rights holder, like a paper or something like that. Right. But and it's just I think it's bedlam. Like, wouldn't you think, Strud? Like trying to figure out what you're supposed to cover that day. Like there was a time where papers would send 4, 5, 6 reporters. And columnists, and everyone would be there. And now it's like you're lucky if there's one writer from a paper that might be there representing the newspaper, and they have to make a decision every day, like what's the right thing to go write about. Do you write about the Canadian story, or do you write about the bigger Olympic story for that given day? So, I get the impression like that's part of it as well, just trying to jockey between events and figure out which one really makes the most sense. And how can you know before you go, right? Like if you get some Canadian that comes out of nowhere and does something great, why would you be thinking, okay, that's something I'm going to cover before the event goes down? Yeah, and then logistically getting around a city that is jam-packed with people. Most of it is around, obviously in and around Paris. Now, some were just outside. But what I found really interesting when I was watching the gymnastics, the number of photographers taking picture of the athletes. Like, that box had to have 20 to 30 people with massive cameras, all trying to get the perfect picture. And like, I get it. Like, it's an amazing story, but what picture are you trying to get that your buddy or 25 other people around you are going to get? Like, who are you selling these to? Like, are these going to like sports? Like, I just don't understand why they're all there. Like, is it? Like one picture of Simone Biles is awesome. Like, she's an amazing athlete, but you're trying to get her a special moment in the air, or what? Like, what's the goal? And then who are you selling them to? Because those looks like pretty big piece of hardware they have. It's a good question, man. Yeah, it's a very good question. It's not a paparazzi thing because it is a public event and everyone understands that it's going to be covered, but it has that kind of feel to it where there's just like the cameras are consistently around these athletes all the time, just snap, snap, snap. Like, how many pictures are in there are really unflattering pictures? That was me and you, and we're just walking around. Like, if someone was sitting here snapping pictures of me all day, there'd be 90% of them I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like that, you can't show that to the world. I look like a mutant. Please don't do that.
Yeah, I'd be the same boat. Yeah. But I guess you're trying to capture one perfect in the air or whatever they're doing. Right. But then who are you selling those to? Like, I guess
I don't know.
Is it still magazines? Like, I was looking at them. I was texting with my buddies. Like, no one really knew why there'd be so much coverage of pictures. It looked like at that moment.
Yeah, they're out there. Someone's consuming them, right? Someone's buying them. Someone's publishing them, and someone's consuming them. It's out there. All right. So thanks to Nabil. We appreciate him doing that. USA getting past Serbia on the men's side today. A couple of Canadian medals. You've got beach volleyball. The Canadian women are off to the finals to play Brazil, who are the number 1 ranked team in the world. So that's going to be a battle. But a bunch of really cool stories as we continue with the Olympic Games. Jays Orioles tonight. We'll continue to tee up that and get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus. Don't sweat. All right, Struddy, Week 10 in the CFL tonight. You got Jays Orioles tonight, the Olympic Games continuing. You got NFL preseason as well, right? We got that going now. So that's always tough to gamble on. Like I heard Al's brother on the station earlier today. I think he was betting on like the Bills first half spread. It's tough, man. You get into like preseason, week 1 preseason gambling on the NFL. Very tough to do. You've really missed it. Yes. If that's what you want to do. Like, you can't predict who's going to play, how long they're going to play for, what's the other team going to play. Like, it's a lot. But I get the excitement, man. Everyone loves the NFL. Everyone's gearing up for it. I look forward to my fantasy drafts. Been doing a little research, trying to figure out how to defend my championship. So pretty fun times. So how often do you, like, when you say you're preparing, because I find it changes for me based on basically what's going on in my life, whether it's a hockey draft, football draft. Sure. Sometimes, I'll have maybe I'll have a flight somewhere and I'm like, I got 2 hours, I'm going to read up on a bunch of different stuff. And then there's other times where it's like, I forgot the draft is in 5 minutes and I'm just going to wing it. And I've noticed that over the years, Strud, it makes no difference, generally speaking, in terms of what the result's going to be. Yeah, you do. Well, I won mine last year. You know how I got it? I got Nakua off waivers after like week 1. And like I still talk about like I assembled this team over 5 years. Like it was just like the perfect thing. Literally, I got lucky and that guy went off all year long. So yeah, I'm trying. So what I do is I'll buy a magazine, like a fantasy football, and flip through it and just try to, see who people think are going to do this or do that and trying to get a little sense. Then I'll do a little research online. But you're right. Like, I hate to say this, but health is a big deal. Huge. Health is a big deal in it. And that's a bit of luck. Obviously not a bit. It is luck, obviously, for you and the athlete. It's bad luck for them and bad luck for you. And then just getting, like, I've always found if you can get a waiver pickup or a rookie that comes out of nowhere, in a couple keeper leagues. So if you can get a guy late in the draft and now he's your 8th round pick, and he's a first rounder value, like you're a stud. It's over. If you don't do that, it's over. And so that's why I won. And I'd like to tell you that I was great, but you got to have it, though. It's the truth. You got to have it. Like, whether it's, fantasy or real life sports, like things have to break your way. And you got to have some players that show up that you weren't expecting, that even maybe you didn't put a lot of thought into. Like, that's the draft. Like you look at like the NHL draft, there's so much time and effort that would go into the first round pick. Like, so much, the GM's there, the head coach, the owner's there. Everyone's like, all right, who are we taking? Do we have the jersey? Do we have the nameplate? By the 7th round, you're asking your scouts, the guy who's in Europe, do you really like this guy? Fine, let's take him. You know what I mean? Like, fine, we'll take it. It's not that he hasn't done his homework or that you haven't seen him, but you just don't put nearly as much time, effort into it. It's not possible to do it. And really, you're not expecting that much out of them either. There's a reason that player's going in the 7th round is because they don't have that kind of hype or that kind of game tape or whatever. Yet those are the guys that when they hit, it changes everything for you. Huge. It changes everything for every team. Well, think about Joe Pavelski. I believe he was a 7th rounder, right? Yes. Or even later. And he had an amazing career. Obviously, just an absolutely amazing career. But for them to find that guy that late in the draft and become a top 6 player, and top even a top line player, that is just found. It's like finding $1 million in your jeans. It's perfect. It just works out so well. So
I do believe in drafting and developing. I really do. I think you got to spend a lot of time and money on developing your players as much as possible. And I would look at my successes. So let's say I drafted a player in the 5th round. He became a 400-game player. As much as I look at the guys that I drafted and didn't work out, like what did we do right or what did we do wrong, and try to figure it out. And I know it's not all clear cut, but what can we learn from each player we drafted and why it's not working or why it did work, and try to figure that out for both the player and the team, because hitting in the draft, you get 2-3 players in a draft, man. That's life changing for an organization.
It's mandatory in pro sports that you can turn over talent, because players are going to eventually age out. They're going to price themselves out. Mm-hmm. Injuries are going to pile up, and sometimes it's just the rich getting richer. Like you've already got a great team, and then look at Dallas. Look at the stars. Like you mentioned, Pavelski was a part of this. Like Logan Stankoven shows up last year and is a stud, and immediately is inserted top 6. And you're like, this guy. He was a good junior player, but I think he was a late 1st-round pick or early 2nd-round pick, and he's playing as a 20-year-old, and he's a stud, and that allows you to possibly fulfill the role that was held by Joe Pavelski. All right, Pavelski's going to retire. See you later. Now Stankoven's here. So you're going to score 40? Maybe not, but I wouldn't be shocked if he scored 30 next year. And it's just the easiest way to patch up the holes that are going to show up, even though you didn't do anything for them to be there. It's just you have a finite number in your cap. Sometimes players want to go somewhere else. Sometimes guys get injured or they just don't fit or whatever it's going to be. And if you can rely on drafting and developing in a farm system, that's how you build dynasties. Like that's how you build just consistent winning, is you do it from within, because you get those picks for free. Everyone's given the same amount every year.
Sure.
Everyone gets the same amount. You can trade them or you can trade for them, but you all start, in the year 2030, every single team in the league has 7 picks as of today. So they're free. They're 18. It's tough. It's not going to be easy. But if you hit on them, it's such a game changer for you.
It's huge. Well, let's just look at the Blue Jays. So you look at Alek Manoah. We know the way he came in and the way he was playing. Draft play, good player, and for whatever reason it hasn't worked out. And then the other, who was the other guy? Is it Pearson? The other pitcher? Nate Pearson. So he was moved out. Obviously, it didn't work out. If those two guys were playing well, and whether Pearson was a starter or reliever, just the talent that is in your team, how would that look differently for the Blue Jays, right?
Yep.
And how would it be? Because you'd have probably a top, maybe 1 or 2 top of the order pitchers. And so that is how quick it can change. 1 or 2 players can massively change an organization, whatever sport it is. But the less players you have, obviously NBA, it gets a little harder to stick handle around a bad pick, or a mishit.
Yes, for sure. And that's another thing about the Blue Jays. Listening to Shapiro yesterday, and Shapiro, Atkins, and those that are in support of them based on recent history, and they've had some good teams in the last few years. Like that's not disputable. This team 2 years ago was a really good team. 3 years ago, a good team. Last year, there were holes you could poke at, but they still won 89 games and made the playoffs. That's impressive. But Alek Manoah was a big part of that. And was a big part of the vision and a big part of what you believed they could be, and having Manoah under team control and Vladdy and Bo under team control. Look at this year. Alek Manoah's just never played. The starts that he did give them were not much to write home about, and then he blows his arm out. So he starts injured. He starts in the minors. He comes up, makes a few starts, blows his arm out. He's gone. Effectively a non-factor this season. Bo Bichette, effectively a non-factor based on the way he played. Like, he gave them a certain amount of games, but the way he was playing statistically, he was like below a replacement level player in terms of stats. He had 4 home runs on the year. So, like, 2 of your pillars, 2 years ago, it was going to be Manoah, Vladdy, Bo. Right. Like, those are the 3 guys, your marquee guys, your stud A starter, your shortstop, your first baseman. And this year, one of them is contributing to the team. And the team is 10 games under 500. Like, it's not a coincidence.
Yeah. No, it's not. Because you're counting on that. You know, give those guys credit, Atkins, and they were counting on those 3 to be the foundation. Then you build off of that, right? And that's so you do have to have some sympathy, but at the same time, that's where they're at, because we don't know what Manoah is going to be like. I'm assuming the other 2 will be healthy and come back to play. And like Pearson, as a first rounder, he's out the door. So it's a challenge, but that drafting and developing, to kind of wrap this up, that drafting and developing for every organization. But I think in hockey and baseball, you've got to have that draft, and then how do we develop these players? What are they doing? And I'll share a story. When I was drafted by the Islanders, I was surprised to be drafted by them, and then they weren't known as a great organization at that time. But Mike Milbury's a GM, and they hired a guy here named Pete Friesen, who was at the University of Alberta. He would subsequently become the trainer for the Carolina Hurricanes when they won their Stanley Cup. But they hired that guy to work out with myself and another player who was drafted here, and it's Zdeno Chara. The three of us worked out every day at the U of A under, quite far ahead of their time, the Islanders having a personal trainer for us. And that kind of set the course for all three of us. Now, Chara's ceiling was a little bit higher than ours, but, you get the idea. They planned that. They got it organized. And it was huge. It was huge for my career personally. And that, I always wondered, like, what if they hadn't done that? Not that I wasn't in shape, but would have been a different outcome, or would have been a bit more of a challenge. So that is the kind of difference I'm speaking of, about the drafting and then developing. What do these guys need? And how can we support them as young players for whatever franchise you're in, or any sport?
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, how you felt about veteran players and the role that they would play in the development of, younger players. In other words, let's use Edmonton as an example. Would McDavid and Draisaitl, is it their responsibility at all to take 18, 19-year-olds under their wing, or at least show them, hey, this is the way we operate? Like, I guess establish a culture that can go a long way as well for young players to show up and be like, okay, this is how pros operate. This is how we work here.
Yeah, and I think that it is on those guys, but they're also like, for a guy who was just drafted this year, they're not going. They'll see him at training camp, but they're not going to see him all year. I think once they get to the team, then he can really support them. But I'll give you an example. When I was with the Canucks, Marcus Naslund was there, and he obviously was a Swede, and he invited me to come out to Sweden to train with him, for a week or two. And I was young. I was 24, 25, and I was just like, I'm good. I'll stay here. But I really regret that, because I would have gone out there, and here's a guy that was really skilled. And you could debate more skilled than me or not, but I'm going to say he was more skilled than me. Okay. To go there, work out with him, skate with his buddies, all those types of things. What are they doing differently that maybe could add to my own, to what I'm doing already? That was obviously working decently, but what could I have done? And those are the kind of things that I wish, I would have taken advantage of, going somewhere. And then likewise, bringing a young player, say, hey, why don't you come train with me here in Edmonton for a while, even a week or 2 weeks, and we'll just train together, and we'll kind of work out, and you can see how hard you have to work to get at that top level. Because the guys are in such good shape now, and it's not enough. It's not enough just to be in shape. You also have to be on the ice. You have to be, watching video, getting ready, and prepping. And I remember when I ran into Andrew Cogliano, a longtime NHLer in BC. He had a young guy in there, Ty Delandria. Ty was living with him for like 2 or 3 weeks in Invermere, training with him. And it was a great idea. I'm like, that is how you pass it forward. That's how you make it work for the young guys and teach them how to be NHL players.
Yeah, and like I believe what's happened the last number of years, maybe it's not going to happen this year, is usually McDavid and Matthews hook up down in Arizona for like 10 days.
Yeah.
And they skate every day, and they work on different things, and both of them have been interviewed, and, it's tough. Like, you always ask the question, hey, Matthews, what are you going to take out of McDavid? You're never going to skate like McDavid.
Yeah.
And the same thing, McDavid's like, hey, do you think you can pick up on his shot? He can't shoot like Matthews. It's not going to happen. There's nothing you can do about the natural talents that any other player has, but obviously they feed off each other in some areas, in terms of whatever it might be. Maybe face-offs. Maybe it's, working edge work in the corner. I don't know what it is, picking up on different drills that they've picked up on. But
sure,
by all accounts, they both seem to benefit pretty well from, and why wouldn't it? When you're at that class, like McDavid's one of one, but the only guy that's even within his range, it's Matthews, Draisaitl, McKinnon. There's like 3 or 4 other guys who could step on the ice with him and say, all right, at least I can dance with you here. I can keep up with you.
Short list, and you raise each other's play. It's like, if you play with 4 guys, if you go golfing and 3 of them are brutal, you're probably going to play worse than you normally do. When you step up in a weight class and play with 3 golfers that are better than you, you play better.
Right.
So when you put that much talent, and it's anywhere, you practice with people that are better than you, you're going to play at a higher level. And I think that pushes to a higher level. So, for McDavid and those guys, it's hard to find people that are better than them to train with, but you can still watch and pick up things the way I know guys shoot. I know McDavid's spoken about how watching Matthews, how he shoots the puck, and he's learned a few things. Now, they kind of score in different ways, but still the idea of, can I steal this? Maybe I can shoot this way or whatever. So it'd be neat to see those guys on the ice, push kind of, do they teach each other stuff? Are they just watching each other? Who's running the practices or the skill sessions? But the way that the guys work their skill sessions now is just, it's incredible.
Crazy,
it's year round. It's year round. And I mean, the skill level through the league is higher than it's ever been. The top guys were always good, but now even lines 3, 4 and the 6, 7, 8 defensemen are much more talented than they were, even 15, 20 years ago, buddy.
It's a good point. Like the skills, always developing those and pushing those forward, because pros forever you knew you had to be in the gym, you had to ride the bike, go for runs, lift weights or whatever, and there's different ways to train now probably compared to where it was 30 years ago, but still you knew you had to be in good shape and you knew, okay, I got a good idea how to do that. But now, to your point, it's like you're stick handling every day. You're working on like edge work every single day, and it's that's how the game just continues to evolve every offseason. It collectively across the league gets that much sharper and that much better.
What's crazy when you think about like generational players, right? You think of Wayne Gretzky or Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, and then Mario, Sidney Crosby, and now I think it'd be fair to say that the McDavid was the next one. And you always think, what is the next generational guy going to be like? When I think of the way Crosby played, and then you have McDavid, who's playing that much faster. Like, I'm actually scared for defensemen, my brothers and sisters, if you have to play against someone who is another level, like the next evolution of hockey player, of Connor McDavid. It's really quite scary actually to think about someone that can skate, and maybe are they bigger, maybe a harder shot, and that's not taking anything away from Connor. I'm just trying to think what the next evolution is
I'm not sure.
For that.
Not sure. It's a good
even
question.
Eric Lindros. Eric Lindros to me was a genetic freak. You saw him on the ice at 6'4", 235, skating around like he was, just a tiny little guy. It's like the next guy. What is that next guy going to be like in the NHL? What is that next generation talent going to be like?
I don't know. And again, I think they'll take advantage of technology, of sports science, all that kind of stuff. And it's like we were talking about with racing. Like Usain Bolt 9.58. How do you beat that? How does the next wave show up? And is it a training? Is it technology? Is it the shoe? Is it the track? I don't know. But it's scary to think that could happen. The next guy could just show up 10 years from now, and all of a sudden the guy's throwing out like a 9.48. He's breaking 9.5 or something. And like that's always the goal, and that's the beauty of every generation pushing it forward and just getting better and better and better. Because the bar's been set, and you got to find a way to pass it and push it forward. We'll come back with our best bets, brought to you by FanDuel. Jays Orioles tonight, and again, we're tracking the Olympic Games. A lot of great Canadian content out there, and we'll recap what happened throughout the day in Paris as well before we set sails here on OverDrive. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus. All right, today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I'm going to take the under in the Jays game tonight. Gosman on the mound at home. The bats have been lively the last couple of games, although, night one was a lower score. I feel like you've got Vladdy who's going to be cooking. I got Jackson Holiday recording a hit tonight as well. I don't know if he's going to hit a home run. I'd probably bet against that 4 straight games. But Jackson Holiday to record a hit under the number. Total runs 9 tonight. It's a pretty high number. I'll take the under. And Holiday to record a hit. That parlay paying plus 177. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth when you bet baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. 19 plus, physically located in Ontario. If you've been betting, Vladdy to record a hit for the last month or so, you've been making a lot of money because he's hit in 19 straight games, and he goes for 20 tonight. And I think, there's not a lot here if you're a Blue Jay fan that is overly positive. Obviously they're 10 games under 500. They're just kind of playing out the run. I don't think any fan, appreciates the spoiler role. I think anyone shows up, right, Strud, and they're like, yeah, let's spoil the Orioles' chances here of winning the AL East or the Yankees or whatever. But, Vladdy remaining hot the rest of the way. and putting up big numbers possibly is a story that could keep people captivated. I think that's what you're hoping for. Give me some youth that shows up. Give me a good Gosman start, Bassett start, Barrios start from time to time, and let Vladdy keep cooking. It's kind of all you can ask for right now if you're a Blue Jay fan.
We're looking for moments in the game. Why do I continue to stay interested in this, right? What kind of moments are we having? And Vladdy's providing that for sure, and he is the guy on that team. So other than that, you're hoping to sprinkle in and maybe a couple good starts, by like you said, a couple of young pitchers or a couple older pitchers and a couple of young players coming up at some point, and maybe you want to take a look at this guy or that guy. But the moments that Vladdy's providing is definitely keeping them kind of in the news cycle right now. Because without it, you're right. You're just trying to, just finish up the year and then find out what happens postseason after the season, whether it's changes on any level, and then you look forward to the offseason and hope to see improvement. If you're the Blue Jays, so it's a tough time. I mean, we've all been cheered for teams. Like I cheer for the Giants, and I know going to this season, there's not going to be a lot of moments. Maybe Malik Neighbors, the great young receiver, that's the guy you're watching for. I hope to be surprised. But I think my expectations are, 500 would be an unreal year, and probably as an organization, you probably don't even want that because you want to get some higher picks.
Well, and from that standpoint, that going in, right? Like that's the difference with the Jays, where I think the Blue Jay fans were kind of hopeful that this team would be a good team. I think the management was planning on them pushing up towards 88, 89 wins, if not 90 plus, and being a playoff team, and it's just never materialized at any point, where I think you're being reasonable there with the Giants. If maybe they surprise you, maybe everything breaks their way. It's probably unlikely, but maybe they get 7-8 wins, maybe 9 wins, and you're kind of in a hunt in November, right? Like, are you in the hunt in November where maybe that wild card spot could be available? Possibly, but at least you have your sights set, I think, on a reasonable bar going into
fair
it.
Point.
Where it's what makes this season so tough for Blue Jay fans is that we're still holding on to some hope that they'd be competitive, and it again just never happened, and it's not going to happen the rest of the way. And now you got to wait, 6-7 months before you can really find out whether or not next year's going to be any different. And
if you look
can't
at that
press
team,
fast forward.
look at their division. Which team could take a step back next year? Is there one?
It might be the Jays. That's what's scary here, right? Like, what's scary is they could be worse.
That's not the answer you want to hear.
No, I know, but it really is like they could be worse next year.
Yeah.
Like the front office is selling the idea that they will be better and that they will make changes and they're going to figure out what went wrong. And maybe they will. And that's probably a safer bet that they take steps forward and they are better. But they also could be worse, or could be as bad. And then what you've got is a complete, rebuild, blow it up, start from scratch, 3, 4, 5 years away from even thinking about being competitive. And what sucks about that is usually when you get to a scenario like that, where an organization realizes, okay, we've hit rock bottom here, there's nothing we can do, we've got to start from scratch, is there were signs you should have done it years before. And I think that's where this organization, the Blue Jays, are going to have to answer for that if that happens next year. Because I think a large portion of the fan base right now wants them to really reset the organization because they're just not good enough. And yet it doesn't sound like they're willing to do that. They're too stubborn, and they want to sell tickets and put up a facade as if they're going to be competitive next year.
Interesting parallels, actually, between the Raptors and Blue Jays, right? The Raptors may be a few years ahead of the Blue Jays, but maybe should they have started their quote unquote rebuild a little sooner?
100% they should have. And there's a great example, Strud, where I think a lot of people look back on it and realize, you know what, Kyle Lowry should have traded him
for sure.
A couple of years ago. You should have moved off Pascal Siakam a couple of years, or at least a year prior to that. Right. OG Anunoby. Don't let Fred VanVleet walk for nothing. There were signs where you're like, guys, you're holding on. It's not going to work. You're going to have to do it anyway. Do it now. And it's very, very paralleled here with the Jays if it ends up continuing to go the wrong way, where you're like, guys, why didn't you make those moves a year ago? Why didn't you realize, okay, the writing's on the wall, you have to do it. There's nothing you can do to turn this ship around. But they're gonna keep pushing forward, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. All right, Struddy, good stuff, buddy. As always, thanks for doing this, pal. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of the Olympics.
You got it. You too. There he is, Jason Strudwick. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out today. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today, TV, radio, podcast, web, whatever it is, we appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll chat then.